The Call, a short story by Dameien Rodgers. One night on spring break, my mother finally trusted me to be able to stay home alone without my older cousins babysitting me. My mother always made sure she had someone to watch me if she had to work nights due to her working graveyard shifts as a paramedic. I still remember the moment when she grabbed her keys and headed out the door in her uniform as she informed me of what the rules were. Again, like a drill sergeant, she instructed me to not let anyone in the house until she returns, and not a second sooner. She also demanded that I clean my room, but not before she said, "Goodbye, Tona. I'll miss you as always, Pumpkin," as she exits the door. I was so thrilled that I was finally given the opportunity to be home alone, because I rarely get to experience an empty house where I can play video games and enjoy being as loud as I want without anyone telling me to quiet down. I was so amped that I didn't even think of all the bad things that could potentially happen. But who cares? It was time to enjoy my free time. The night started off as planned with the joy of getting lost in the world of violent video games and eating a ton of snacks. I'm not supposed to be eating when all of a sudden I heard my phone ring. I paused the game in order to see who it was, and to my surprise, it was my mom who appeared on the screen. I quickly picked up the phone and spoke. "Hello?" There was a dramatic pause, and then a voice that I didn't recognize spoke on the other line. "Hey dear, can you let me inside, please?" The only thing I could muster to say was, "Huh? Mom?" The voice responded, "Yeah, sweetie, it's me. Let me in, please." This left me utterly confused because I remembered my mom grabbed her keys before she left. The entire room went quiet, and I nervously hung up the phone and jumped off the couch and ran to the front door, which is only a few feet from our couch. I then peeked through the peephole and seen nothing, so I felt some form of relief as I backed away from the door. But there were still more questions forming in my head, trying to wrap my head around what has happened. But my thoughts were interrupted with the sound of my phone ringing again. I froze and hesitated to answer my phone from fear of what waited for me on the other side of the line. But I must find out what's going on. I slowly put the phone to my ear, and the same voice spoke again. "Hey, sweetie, what's going on? Why won't you let Mommy in?" "It's me, sweetie." I froze again, standing right in front of the door. I stepped forward to check the peephole again and saw nothing. So I gained the confidence to tell the person on the line that they are not my mother, and hung up the phone again. I became frightened because I didn't know what happened to my mother. Is she safe, and am I even safe for that matter? Before I could process all of that, I decided to start to dial up the police, but suddenly the phone rung again before I could finish. This time it was a different number that I couldn't recognize. Although I could have simply just ignored it, I thought to myself, what if it's Mom? I was so nervous I ran into the kitchen, which was past the couch and to the left of the stairs, and grabbed a knife. I then answered the phone and put it to my ear and spoke. "Hello?" The voice on the other line said with a deep voice, "Let me in, boy. It's your dad." So I quickly hung up the phone and felt my heart begin to almost burst through my chest. Taking a moment to catch my breath, I paced back and forth from the front door and back to the kitchen. I then thought I should definitely call the cops because my father is dead, and there is no way that was him. I began to dial 911 while my hands shook uncontrollably, but before I could finish, I heard loud banging at the front door right in front of me. So I crouched down and quietly crawled to the window by the front door and tried to peek through the blinds from the bottom, when all of a sudden, my phone rung, which was extremely loud in the moment of silence while I attempted to silence it. As I heard the noise stop, I looked up outside the window, I seen a tall, older black man with gray hair right out the window looking directly at me. I was frozen in fear as I watched him pull a phone out from his pocket and type something in. He slowly brought the phone to his ear while staring me directly in my eyes, and I began to hear my phone ring again. I looked down and seen the same number appear. So I bravely answered the phone and shouted, "What do you want from me? The police will be here soon, so you'd better leave now." The room and the phone line were quiet for a moment, and then suddenly a loud and eerie whistling noise coming from the phone, which caused me to drop my phone and grab my ear as I jumped back from the window. The sound really hurt my ears, but I had no time to waste, so I quickly reached down for the phone. As I slowly made my way back up with the phone in my hand, I looked at the window and thought to myself, is he still out there? I then suddenly see the blinds fly up and the old man was standing right in front of the window staring at me. I feel my phone vibrating in my hand as I stare at the man in awe as I backed away towards the stairs. I placed the phone to my ear and heard a voice speak again. "Let me in, boy." My skin started to crawl because his voice made the entire house shake without him moving his lips. This forced me to finally turn and bolt up the stairs as fast as I could, which caused me to stumble and drop my phone on the stairs. I got up quite fast, though, and proceeded to run for my life without looking back. While in the process of running, I could hear pounding on the window, which nearly gave me a heart attack. I can never catch a break. I finally made it to my room, but not before slamming and locking the door behind me. So much was running through my head at the moment that I began to cry from the fear of not knowing what to do and wondering if what was happening real. What am I going to do? I thought to myself. I started to wipe my tears and quiet my cries to listen and notice it's awfully quiet downstairs. I grew anxious, wondering what's going on outside, and then I heard a melody coming from downstairs, and as I slowly cracked open the door, I could finally make out that it was my phone. While running upstairs, I dropped my phone and was too scared to go back for it. I began to cry a little more as I laid my back against the wall because I realized I was going to have to build up some courage to get my phone to have any chance at receiving help. I could really die right now because my mom is not going to be home for hours. I considered my options as the phone continuously rang for a few minutes, and I finally forced myself to open the door all the way and slowly began to make my way downstairs. As I made it downstairs, I could see the phone is still ringing, but the old guy is nowhere in sight. I continued to inch closer and closer to the phone, and suddenly I heard a glass break in the kitchen, so I panicked and ran to the phone and grabbed it. As soon as I got it, I turned and ran fast as I could upstairs while hearing footsteps running and chasing me upstairs from the kitchen. When I had finally made it in my room, I quickly locked the door behind me. As soon as I backed away, I had seen the door begin rattling, and they started hitting the door, which caused the door to vibrate back and forth until cracks began to form. At this moment in time, I was shaking uncontrollably and can barely hold my hand still as I attempted to call the police. As soon as I dialed 9, the phone had rung again, which was again the same number that had been calling every time. I attempted to make a call for help. I declined the call, but every time I did this, they continued to call over and over again, which caused me to just break down to my knees. As loud bangs continued to come from the door, I began to accept my fate as I closed my eyes, but suddenly the banging stopped. I stayed there on my knees, just waiting on my knees, just waiting with my eyes closed as the phone rung again. The phone went off multiple times before I finally decided to open my eyes and see that this time it was my mom's number calling again. I reluctantly picked the phone up and put it to my ear as I waited for someone or something to speak. After a moment of silence, I began to hear whistling come from the phone, and then the old guy punched his hand through the door, which snapped me out of my daze and caused me to run and hide in my closet with my phone in my left hand and my right hand on the handle because I didn't have a lock on my closet door. When I finally came to my senses, I finally realized I had my phone in my hand and I should attempt to call for help again, so I did. But this time the call wouldn't go through for some reason. I tried over and over and still had no success at reaching the police or family. This caused me to become frustrated, so I threw my phone aside and started to weep from realizing my mom wasn't going to be home for hours, even if something didn't happen to her. I felt alone, scared, and confused as I laid down in despair. Hours of time had passed by, and eventually I had dozed off by my closet door. When I woke up, I had forgotten that I had nearly lost my life and my mom could still be in danger. I quickly jolted up at the thought of this and decided to reach for the handle on the door while still on my knees. As I grabbed the handle, I began to slowly turn it and open the door as the door made the creaking sound that an older door makes. The more the door inches forward, I clearly seen the daylight shining through my bedroom window as I looked around and crawled out in confusion. Did I really sleep that long? I then started to think I dreamt the whole thing until I looked at the door and seen the hole and the cracks in the bedroom door still there. I was instantly convinced that this wasn't a dream. I got up to my feet and headed to my bedroom door and slowly opened it, as it made the same creaking sound echoing through the house. I looked around the hallway both ways, then proceeded to slowly make my way downstairs and jumped in fear as I suddenly heard pieces of wood break off the bedroom door. Once I realized it was just the door, I continued to go down the stairs and could see the light flowing through the blinds because they were still up on the window from when the old guy was standing there by the front door. As I made it to the living room, I felt an uneasy feeling begin to develop. In spite of this, I continued to inch towards the front door as goosebumps and a pain in my chest intensified. I reached for the handle with every hair on my body standing straight up, and my heart beating so fast I could barely control my breathing. As I turned the knob, I heard a whistling noise coming from directly behind me. So close I could feel the warm breath on my head. This forced me to quickly swing the door open and run outside, but as soon as I made it to the edge of the porch, my body suddenly stopped, and I could no longer move. In this frozen position, I noticed that all the daylight I had seen from inside the house was gone, and it was pitch black outside. My body had begun to hover off the ground, and in the brink of confusion, my body was spun around upside down to face the older black man as he stared me in my eyes with a smile on his face. The man then spoke without moving his lips. "Thanks for letting me in, child." This made me quiver in fear as I watched the house and everything in sight fade away, slowly as his hand reaches out to my face. When his hand finally touched me, I could feel my eyes roll to the back of my head as everything goes black. And everything was black for quite some time until I heard a familiar voice call out, "Tona! Tona!" I was shaken awake as my eyes slowly started to focus. I seen my mother. I leap up from excitement that my mom was actually here, and I was no longer alone. She greeted me right at the front door inside the house with what felt like the biggest hug I've ever received. I was so relieved she was here, I had almost forgotten the danger we were in. My mom asked, "Baby, why were you on the floor, and why haven't you answered my calls?" I then began to explain everything that happened while crying on her, but she suddenly cut me off. "Oh, baby, why are you whistling like that? Are you okay?" I was utterly confused and didn't understand why she didn't hear me. My mother then attempted to let me go and look at me, but I pulled her back in tightly for some reason, and she nervously spoke. "Tona, what's going on, Pumpkin? Why are you holding me so tight, baby? You need to stop right now and let me go," said my mother as she grew aggravated with my actions. I was now more confused than ever because I noticed I can't move my arms, and I can't let my mom go. What's going on here? As we tossed back and forth, we eventually moved in front of the window by the front door, and I vaguely caught a glance of myself in my reflection, and noticed the person tussling with my mom wasn't me. It was the older black man, and I seen a knife in his hand, poking my mother in her side, and to my horror, I realized that I was not in control. As my mother continued to attempt to fight me off and break from my grip, I could see she had no chance of escaping, and there was nothing I could do but shed a tear and watch myself do this to her. I then watched as we plunged the knife in my mother's back, as the sound of her screams echoed throughout the house. The end.